Okay, so welcome everyone to another meeting of Triangle Skeptics. Yeah, you just want to make sure that everyone comes here with an open but critical mind. Be aware of your own biases and respect your fellow human beings here and other attendees, and abide by the guidelines, which are posted on the meetup page. I'll just go through them very quickly. Listen up, just hear others' opinions, speak up if you're comfortable doing so. But since this is the talk, Joel can say whether he wants us to ask questions as he's at the throughout the talk, or ask questions at the end of the talk.
If I can interrupt you, if someone can monitor chat,
sure.
If you put your questions in chat, and whoever's monitoring, you can interrupt me and ask the question.
Okay.
Because if I'm talking, I'm not going to be aware of what's in chat or any hands up.
Okay. Yeah. We can do that. I can do that. Yeah, me or Faith can do that.
Cool.
We'll do it.
And then,
thank you.
Yeah, be honest, about the meeting, and be respectful. I think that's the most important one, right? Be respectful. All right. So today we're talking about the neurobiology of love, and our speaker is our very own Joel Kann. I think that's Kann, right? I don't normally say your last name.
Kann.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. All right. So take it away, Joel.
Okay. So about 10 days ago, I got a call from Jeff Gelbeck, who said, we need to talk for Valentine's Day. And you head up, he knows I head up a group on sex positivity here in the Triangle. And I said, I'm not sure what I have in talks that covers skepticism. I've given a talk on the history of sex toys and the physiology of orgasm and sex changes in men as they age, but none of these are appropriate. And I kind of thought about it for a second and said, something about the neurobiology of love, and just said, that's a great one. I said, yeah, the problem is I don't have a talk on it. And it's 10 days away. So can I learn this, and can I put together a talk in 10 days? I won't ever do it again. I will tell you that. So if I don't run into a technical glitch, I can bring up the program. And Eric, I am counting on you as a neuroscientist to keep me on the straight and narrow and point out anything I botch. And I also brought my friend along to help out, and we can see what's going on. All right, so I've gone over this with Jeff. Let me see if I can open this up. Stay with me. Now, you should all be seeing my PowerPoint now. That's a yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's try this. Now you're seeing the slide, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, here's the tricky part. You're still seeing the slide, correct?
Yes.
Oh, actually, I need to go back again and do that again. I forgot a step. Forgot one step.
No problem.
I knew I would. I actually wrote the directions on my presenter view.
Good.
I still missed it. Yeah, I've got to put on share sound. And let's go back to that again. You got it? Now, you are seeing the slide, not the presenter view. Okay, that worked. Holy moly. All right, so as I said, we're going to talk about the neurobiology of love. which to me is a fascinating topic and fits in really nicely with Valentine's Day, which for people watching the tape was yesterday. So who am I and why am I doing this? Well, I'm a board certified family physician. Over my career, I've counseled many people on sexual related problems. I'm also the co-founder with my wife, Bonnie, of Sex Positive Triangle, an organization dedicated to sex positivity, now with about 80 some odd members in the area. And I have been over the last 10, 15 years with Bonnie, a sex educator, and have given several classes at senior centers on senior sexuality, which is a particular area of interest of mine and Bonnie's. I've also collaborated with Joan Price, who is a world famous sex educator who also is expert in senior sexuality, and Jessica Drake, who is happens to be a porn star, but also a sex educator. And we collaborated, and I appeared in their first DVD, Jessica Drake's Guide to Wicked Sex, Senior Sex Edition. So yes, you can order that online or stream it. What I am not, I'm not a neurobiologist. So a lot of this is kind of above my pay grade, and I'm hoping people will help me out a little bit. Try not to get too technical, but it's always difficult to do. But we'll take this slowly. So this is the logo of our sex positive organization, Sex Positive Triangle. It's a meetup in a Facebook group. Sexpositivetriangle.org is our website. Feel free to drop in at any time. Right now, it's kind of on a hiatus. Things slowed down during the pandemic, and we're just kind of feeling our way back to activity again. And this is a copy of our DVD, which has won 2 awards so far, and has been written up in about 6 or 7 film and trade journals. Can you see the pointer as I move it around? Or no? Let me try this. How about now? Do you see a little laser pointer?
Yeah.
Hey, that worked. I've learned so many things. That's Joan Price, who's written many books and lectured all over the world. She has a great book on sex and grieving, about how to become sexually active again after losing a partner. And that's Joan and Jessica Drake, both wonderful people. So, and that's us, that's me and Bonnie. So let's get started. And why is it not advancing? Let me turn off the pointer and see if that works. Yeah, that works. Okay. So what is love? Love permeates our culture. Love newly found, love lost, love enduring, passionate love, betrayal, spurned love, jealousy. This is the basis for a good portion of our mythology, our literature, film, and culture. I sometimes wonder if you took away jealousy and being a polyamorous or multi-amorous, if everyone were healthy multi-amorous and had overcome jealousy, we use a term called compersion, which is being happy because your partner is happy in what they're doing. Would we have any art at all? But I guess there's always heroism. Just to let people know, and if you don't recognize it, that's Tristan and Isolde. Up, let me turn my pointer back on. Tristan and Isolde, Romeo and Juliet, Helen in Paris, the face that launched 1,000 ships. Lancelot and Guinevere. And in our culture, that's Frida Kahlo and her lover Diego Rivera. Anthony and Cleopatra. Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier. Some of us older folks probably recognize that, as well as Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. And of course, Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. And finally, King Edward VIII, I believe, and Wallace Simpson, a woman who he fell in love with, who I believe was divorced. And he abdicated his throne as King of England because of their love. So love is very powerful. This, because we just had Valentine's Day, is a portrait from William Adolphe Bouguereau of Cupid and Psyche. Cupid, based basically on the Greek Eros, and was originally portrayed as a virile young man with wings in his bow. And the little cute cherub that we have today came along a lot later. Cupid was the son of Mercury and Venus. And one myth goes that Venus, the goddess of love, was so jealous of the beautiful Psyche that she orders her son Cupid to shoot her with his arrow so that she would fall in love with the first thing that she sees, and it would be some hideous beast. Unfortunately, Cupid accidentally scratches himself with his arrow while doing that, and he falls madly in love with Psyche and eventually becomes her eternal husband. This is sort of an example of a early version of what we'll learn about later is limerence, or new relationship energy, or as the Greeks called it, mania or obsessive love. And this people will recognize as, from Greek mythology, as Narcissus, who was a hunter from Thespe, who was known for his beauty. According to the literature, he rejected all romantic advances and eventually fell in love with the one love object worthy of him, which was his own reflection in a pool of water. He spent the rest of his life staring at his reflection. So this is another example of possibly obsessive self-love. And I threw this in because this is one of my favorites. I don't know if you recognize this. This is Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour in one of my favorite romantic time travel movies, Somewhere in Time. So, what is this thing, love? What's it all about?
Oh, the sound seems to have frozen.
All right.
Oh,
There we go.
it's back.
All right. So Jeff reminded me not to speak while I had those on in case we need to dub them out. So this is what the Greeks felt about love. They had 8 different types of love. Primary is eros. Let me get my laser pointer out again. Eros, which is romantic love, and that's mainly what we're going to talk about tonight. There is also philia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or affectionate love. Storge, familial love, love of your family. Ludus, or playful love, that can be similar to some of the early phases of love. and mania, which can also be part of the early parts of love or obsessive love. And then finally, there's pragma, which is stable self-love or stable love. And there is philautia, which is self-love. And we have a saying of self-love is love. And agape, which is selfless love, or love of your community or love of the world. So we're going to shoot past all the theories of Sigmund Freud and everyone else, and since we're scientists, and go right to Harry Harlow. And anyone who's taken Psych 101 or Family Development Psych knows, and Harry Harlow, and I see Eric nodding his head. Harry Harlow in the 50s was studying attachment development and attachment theory, and he was studying rhesus monkey babies and looking at how they made their attachment. What he did in his experiment, for those who don't know, he provided a choice of two different artificial mothers. One had a very simple face and built over a wire frame and provided food and formula and nourishment to the monkey. The other choice was a terry cloth covered mother with a more detailed face. And he found that the rhesus monkey babies preferred the terry cloth mother to make them feel safe and reduce their anxiety and develop affiliation and attachment rather than seeking nourishment. And from there, he developed his attachment theory and listed three different types of affiliated attachment. The parent-child that we talked about, filial love, parent-child in the Greeks, and filial brother-sister love, and partner. And that could be male-female, male-male, female-female. Doesn't have to be necessarily male-female. And this is just a cartoon that I liked. Okay, and for those of you who didn't know, quiet. That was air supply. So, I knew there would be a glitch in there somewhere. So of the, when we look at some studies, then we went to animal studies, and of the roughly 5,000 species of mammals known, only about 3 to 5% are known to form lifelong pair bonds. That includes some beavers, otters, wolves, bats, foxes, and a few hooved animals and some others. The rest don't seem to form lifelong pair bonds. This also doesn't cover other than mammals. So the next thing that comes up is a study of voles. This was a study that looked particularly at cute little prairie voles and montane voles because they form pair bonds. And what you see here is a partner selection test. And what they did is they took the voles, both the prairie and the montane, but mainly looking at the prairie voles since they form bonding, lifelong bonding. The montane voles don't form bonding pairs. They allowed them to cohabitate with a partner, and then they put them in this 3-chambered device when they were studying the females, they would take her male partner. Let me bring up the pointer. The male partner and anchor them in one side chamber, and then take a stranger, male, and anchor them in the other chamber. And when they studied the males, they did the opposite. They had females on both sides. The center vole then was free to choose either to stay where they were neutrally or spend time with a partner or time with the stranger of the opposite sex. This was a graph of what they found. So looking at the female prairie voles, what they looked at was time spent with different partners. The blue is with their mating partner. The orange is in the neutral chamber in the center, and the gray is with the stranger. The first that says CSF is the baseline. So these are unmated female prairie voles. So they haven't copulated within 24 hours of the test, but they are paired with another vole. So they spend, you see, about 60% of their time with their partner. A small percentage in neutral and about the same small percentage with the stranger. So prairie voles, even though they pair bond, they also will mate with strangers occasionally when the chance comes up. Then they injected oxytocin into the females. And what they noticed here with the oxytocin hit, there was a big increase in choosing their pair bond, up to about 90%, and only about 10% with the stranger. They then injected vasopressin, since these are two hormones felt to have something to do with pair bonding, released by the posterior pituitary, I believe. They found that there wasn't much of a difference if you look at the vasopressin, the third bar, and the first bar. It didn't seem to have that much effect on the females. They then looked at a mated female, that is someone who copulated with their partner within 24 hours. And this was their baseline, that they wanted to spend most of their time with their partner and only a small amount of time with the stranger. They then gave them an oxytocin receptor antagonist. That is a drug that would block the oxytocin receptors. It's necessary for the oxytocin to bind to receptors for it to be effective. When they did that, they found that the time they spent with their partner and the time they spent with strangers were about equal, and a little bit of time neutrally. They then gave them vasopressin receptor antagonists, so the vasopressin wouldn't be effective. And that again went back to baseline, where they spent most of their time with their partner and very little time with a stranger. So at least in the female prairie voles, forming the bonding seems to be all about oxytocin. Now, the caveat to this, and some studies that have come up recently have shown, interestingly, that female prairie voles that genetically don't have oxytocin receptors still pair bond. And we don't know why. But what it suggests is that, like a lot of this, pair bonding and love is more than just simply one particular hormone or another, and it involves a lot of other neuroreceptors in other parts of the brain, probably GABA, cortisol, several other things. So there's alternate pathways to forming pair bonding. It's not just oxytocin. Now, when they looked at males, they found that, so this was now, the male is anchored in the center, and the partner, female partner, is in one chamber, and the male partner is in the other chamber. They found at baseline, the males would spend about well, maybe 40% of the time and maybe 50% with stranger, and a little bit in neutral. When they gave them oxytocin, unlike the females, there wasn't much of a change. They didn't react, so the oxytocin didn't seem to have much of an effect. However, when they gave them vasopressin, they spent a good deal, 80% of their time, with their partner, and very little with the stranger. Same thing when you look at the mated pair. That's again, the male and the female have mated right before the test. They wanted to spend almost all their time with their partner. When they gave them oxytocin receptor antagonist, excuse me, there was no change. They still wanted to stay with a partner. However, when they gave them vasopressin receptor antagonists, again, they block the receptor to make vasopressin active, it went back to about half the time with a stranger and half the time with a partner. So it seemed that in males, it wasn't oxytocin, but it was vasopressin that seemed to have that effect. They also noticed in the males that when they were given the antagonist or vasopressin, there was an increase in aggression towards other males. So in the prairie vole, there is an abundance of receptors for vasopressin and oxytocin, which are sort of the reward centers of the brain. Not clearly defined, but a lot of structures have been found that have receptors in them, mostly in what's called the subcortex. What they also found is the montane voles don't have a lot of these receptors. Okay, moving on. So a quote from Pat Mumbley from Science Daily. Falling in love causes our body to release a flood of feel-good chemicals that trigger specific physical reactions. This internal elixir of love is responsible for making our cheeks flush, our palms sweat, and our hearts race. And I'm sure most of us, if not recent, at least in our youth, remember that. And here's sort of a picture of what hormones basically do we know are effective if you break down love into lust, which is basically sex, attraction phase, that's early phase or puppy love, and attachment, long-term relationships. The first phase is mainly sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. The early attraction phase seems to be mainly dopamine, which is a chemical that gives you a nice pleasure hit that's also been affiliated with addiction and probably similar to when you get a hit of cocaine, norepinephrine and serotonin. And the attachment phase, again, just like the voles, seems to be oxytocin and vasopressin. Again, there are probably a lot of other hormones like cortisol and GABA and many others that I don't remember that probably also play a part. It's not that clear cut that specific centers of the brain and specific hormones are the only ones that affect it. And this is a nice chart talking about what's going on in the different stages of love. In lust, it's mainly seeking sexual union with someone of the same species, predominantly, again, testosterone and estrogen. And the predominant nucleus involved is the amygdala. Here, the amygdala becomes deactivated. It's part of the brain that coordinates fear, fight or flight, helps us stay safe and in potentially dangerous situations. The fact that it becomes deactivated when the person is in love probably means that the fear response is dampened. Then there's the attraction phase, which we'll talk about a bit, where you select partners and focus your attention on, we'll say, the genetically appropriate individual for mating and developing a relationship. I will call it that new relationship energy or limerence or puppy love or early love. That's when you first meet someone and they're the one and things are going to be great. That involves the ventral regimental area of the nucleus accumbens, and probably has a lot to do with dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Dopamine, again, is that reward hormone, something you feel when you accomplish something. It gives you that feeling of reward, desire, euphoric state, also associated with cocaine and addiction, and that feeling that you must be with that person. You've got to keep getting that hit of dopamine. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that promotes vasoconstriction, which is involved in the fight or flight mechanism in our nervous system. It causes a vasoconstriction, or a narrowing of the blood vessels. This in turn increases blood pressure. Like epinephrine, it also stimulates alpha adrenal receptors in the cells of the blood vessels. It increases heart rate and blood sugar levels, hence probably responsible for some of the butterflies that you get in a new relationship. It also inhibits the blood flow to intestinal nervous system, causing a decrease in gut flow, peristalsis, and blood flow, and secretion of digestive enzymes, which may also be involved in those butterflies and maybe some cramping in your stomach. And then finally, there's attachment that we've talked a little bit about. And that is, once you develop trust in that relationship and you're sustaining connections and communicating and talking, now you get that vasopressin and oxytocin. And a lot of that comes from the ventral pallium and the raphe nucleus. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail, and I am not a neuroscientist. There's Eric waving his hand. He gets it. So along came for research this device. This is the functional MRI. This was developed in 1990 by Dr. Seijai Ogawa, and it's been used in a lot of studies looking at cognitive neuroscience, clinical psychiatry, psychology, and sometimes used in preoperative analysis. What it does is it evaluates subtle regional blood flow changes in the brain cortex during patient performance of specific tasks while inside the MRI scanner. Usually, because we're very visual, they show pictures of something as the stimulus. Although our brains can be stimulated by sounds and smells and thoughts and other things, the easiest thing to do is show pictures. So this basically explains how it works. They're testing the magnetic properties of hemoglobin and blood flow. Diamagnetic materials are slightly repelled by a magnetic field and don't retain the magnetic properties when the external field is removed. Paramagnetic materials are slightly attracted to a magnetic field and also do not retain the magnetic properties when the field is removed. Hemoglobin is diamagnetic when oxygenated, but paramagnetic when magnetic when deoxygenated. And this difference in properties, in magnetic properties, allow the scanner to show when certain areas of the brain are getting more blood flow or deactivated and getting less blood flow. I hope that sounds logical to most people. So this has nothing to do with love, but just as an example of what these look like, this is an early functional MRI of a patient that were just alternately shown pictures and black screen. So they were looking at how does our brain react when we see pictures? And you can see some activity around the occipital lobe, and I guess that's in either the temporal lobe or the cortex. But that's basically what it does. It lights up areas, and then they fill in, the computer fills in colors, lights up areas that are either activated, getting more blood flow, or getting less blood flow.
Yeah, actually, Doc, just throw in, yeah, the orange is increased blood flow under those conditions, and the blue is decreased. So when you're shown visual stimuli compared to blank screen, your visual cortex lights up and then temporal cortex is less activated. That's the difference in colors. Sorry.
Cool. I didn't know that. All right, and here is our dopamine, the structure, a very simple structure of dopamine, that good old stuff that gives us that kick. And this shows basically the dopamine pathway. The amygdala is thought to be a core of the neural system processing fear and threatening stimuli. Where is it here? The caudate nuclei functions in planning and execution of movement, but also in learning, memory, reward, motivation, emotions, and we think romantic interactions. There's also stimulation by the release of dopamine of the pituitary gland, which increases, among other things, oxytocin and vasopressin. And there, down in here is the substantia nigra, which is a critical area for the production of dopamine, as well as the ventral tegmental area. So a lot of these are deep within the almost the reptilian part of our brain. This is a scan, one of the early functional MRI scans, looking at activity in the ventral tegmental area. That's in red, and the substantia nigra pars compacta in green. Both of these areas produce dopamine primarily, and these were subjects that were shown pictures of a love interest, and these areas lit up. They were getting that hit of dopamine. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens. This is what we were talking about of the new relationship energy, or limerence. Limerence was a term coined in '77 by Dorothy Tenov, an American psychologist, in her book Love and Limerence: The Experience of Being in Love. She said, where did the term come from? People were trying to figure out its origin. She first used the term amorence, then changed it back to limerence. It has no roots whatsoever. It just looked nice. It works well in French. And she said, take it from me, it has no etymology whatsoever. So limerence is what we call that first phase of bonding, of love, when you're head over heels with someone. Now in the poly community, we call it new relationship energy, or NRE. Like, oh, why is that person acting so crazy? Oh yeah, they're in NRE, they have a new relationship. It's the state of being obsessively infatuated with someone, usually accomplished by some delusions of or desire for an intense romantic relationship with that person. And again, it's under the influence of dopamine, primarily serotonin and norepinephrine. And there's our friend serotonin. So in limerence, in those early stages, what happens is you get a rush of dopamine. Dopamine goes up, and that actually causes serotonin to drop. So you get the opposite, the suppressive effect. The dopamine helps regulate mood, or the serotonin helps regulate mood, and so it drops, and we have problems regulating our mood. It's kind of, you're up and down and all over the place. Influences quality of sleep, so you may not be sleeping as well, or you may be sleeping all the time. Hinders impulsive behavior, so again, it drops, so you're going to have an increase in impulsive behavior, doing all sorts of crazy things, and promotes healthy digestion, and again, it drops, so you're upset, your stomach's upset, you can't eat, you can't sleep. Dopamine, on the other hand, goes up, and that promotes feelings of pleasure, motivation, satisfaction. You want that dopamine hit, and it supports coordination, it assists with short-term memory, and it encourages impulsive behavior. So it does the same thing as that drop in serotonin. They also tend to suppress activity in the frontal cortex. so that we're not thinking straight, we're not reasoning things through, we're doing crazy things. A lot of this has been indicated, like the drop in serotonin, in obsessive compulsive disorders. So think of that early love as maybe even a slight form of OCD. So we have this term limerence, or NRE, and love that we talk about. What's the difference between the two? Well, in limerence, that early phase, we're interested in obtaining affection, in getting that person we're in love with, and forming a bond with them, and having them fall in love with us. Again, it's under testosterone, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. You tend to, because the frontal cortex is shut down a bit, you tend to see the person that you're in love with as perfect. They are the perfect mate. Sort of, to use a phrase, love goggles. Stress, frustration, insecurity, playing mind games, obsessively thinking about the person, like, where are they right now? Why haven't they answered my text? It's been 2 hours. They must not love me. Love, on the other hand, which develops later, or you could call it true love, is more involved with giving affection, making that person happy, sharing events with them. That's mainly vasopressin, probably in the males, and oxytocin in women. You see the flaws of your love object and you accept them as, I see them and I'm okay with them. You're more calm, relaxed, trusting. There's more communication, clear communication. And you can think of other things. Your brain is now working again. You can function like a human again. This is a brief chart showing a little bit about a timeline for this new relationship energy, or NRE. And it's short. Most people say 6 months to maybe 2 years on the outside, depending on the relationship. And this shows not only does that energy peak in that time frame, but then drops off. But this shows the difference between active and receptive stimulation. Receptive stimulation, which is seen more in women than men, is you feel okay, but you're not thinking about that all the time. But then when you kiss someone or you get touched or stimulated, then you're interested. Spontaneous or active is kind of like teenage men walking around with erections all the time, looking for a place to park it. And that stays higher than receptive desire. But it peaks and then it drops, and either you move on or you develop a better relationship with that person. Here's a graph looking at basically serotonin and dopamine levels during that phase. So here you see the blue is the serotonin, the orange is the dopamine, and a rough time frame going at about a year. So the dopamine initially is high. You have a lot of dopamine in there, making you crazy. It starts to drop a little bit. And then as attachment develops, dopamine drops off. The effect of that is sometimes in long-term relationships, once they're established, you get that, I guess they call it the 7-year itch, where you're not getting those dopamine hits anymore. And they're not necessarily a bad thing. Ways to stimulate that are some of the things we do. Trying something new with your partner, taking up a new task, doing something together, raising a family, accomplishing things together. Those will give us little dopamine hits. In the multi-amorous community, it may be forming new relationships with other people while you're still in that bonded relationship. Or in unethical relationships, it may be having an affair and cheating, which some people do, and it's probably because they're looking for that dopamine hit. The serotonin, because of the dopamine rise, drops, and that causes a feeling of dysphoria. We're anxious, we're unable to concentrate, we're very poor at making decisions, And then as the dopamine comes down and we form a trusting relationship, the serotonin starts going up. And if we have a long-term successful relationship, serotonin levels stay fairly high and we feel happy and satisfied with things. And here's our friend oxytocin. I think Bonnie has a necklace of this. And this is just a slide showing the pathway of dopamine down into the pituitary, anterior posterior pituitary, and release of vasopressin, also known as antidiuretic hormone, but that has nothing to do with the love reaction, and oxytocin. All right, we get into a couple of brief studies. We're getting towards the end. I just want to kind of review these because they used functional MRI to show some of the areas of the brain that may be involved. Now, I will say a lot of these studies, their functional MRIs within the study were similar, but they differ a little bit from study to study, depending on how they did it and how they stimulated people. It leads us to believe that this whole thing about romance and love and attachment is probably not as simple as we think. So this was a study by Bartels and Zecchi at the Department of Cognitive Neurology at the University College of London, England, where they were basically looking at what is the difference in the brain function when people are looking at a lover versus when they're looking at a friend. So they recruited 17 subjects who were screened and who claimed to be deeply in love with somebody. And they used a pretty involved screening process and found 17, and there was a pretty good distribution of male, female, and ages and ethnicity. And then they looked at galvanic skin responses. When the subjects, I think they were down to 15 of them at the time, viewed pictures of their love partner, that was the bar in black, and those of friends who they also had about a longer relationship with, but considered to be just friends. And that's the one in gray. Over the whole group in general, although there's some slight differences in some of the subjects, the galvanic skin response of subjects looking at their lover in the on the machine was much greater than that of a friend. And then they did a questionnaire. I think this might have been done after the scan, and they asked them to rate their feelings of love and sexual arousal when viewing pictures of the loved one, again, the black bar, and pictures of the friend, the gray bar, on a scale of 1 to 9. And you see the difference. Feelings of love, pretty high, about 7.5, compared to friends, about 2. And sexual arousal, about 3, and lower at about 1.5 for friends. So I guess you get turned on by your friends sometimes. And this again is just a picture of the brain at the areas that they were looking at. The ventral tegmental area that again releases a lot of dopamine. The anterior cingulate cortex, nucleus accumbens, and the hypothalamus and amygdala and hippocampus. So all areas involving dopamine and reaction. And here's what they found. This was the activity shown in yellow and red, elicited when they were looking at pictures of their love partners compared to pictures of their friends. And I think what they did was subtract the signals, and these were the excess signals in those areas, looking at lover versus friend. The activity is restricted to only a few areas, mostly the anterior cingulate area, the AC, the insula, the eye, the hippocampus, and activity in the caudate nucleus and putamen. So again, you don't have to know those areas. I don't know them that well. And this was cortical activity in the cortex, again, in yellow-red, produced when cortical deactivations, when shown pictures of their loved ones. So there were specific areas that were deactivated also. Now, when you look at what are these areas, so it was the medial insula anterior cingulate cortex, the caudate putamen, globus palliatus, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and the ventral tegmental area. And then you look at where vasopressin and oxytocin receptors are in humans, they almost match up. Also, the caudate putamen and globus palliatus, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and the ventral tegmental area. So this shows the areas being activated are the areas producing dopamine and with vasopressin and oxytocin receptors when they're looking at pictures of their deep lovers. And I think this is the last one, is the Neurobiology of Love, S. Zeki. This was published in a letter in one of the neuro journals. And what they're looking at here, just briefly, is the difference between functional MRI in maternal love, where subjects were shown pictures of it was usually women were shown pictures of a child, their child, and romantic love, where they were shown pictures of lovers. You probably don't have to know the areas, but it's the basic thing here is that they're different. So different areas of the brain are being stimulated with maternal love versus romantic love. So it's not all coming from the same place. This is another slide from the same thing. Looking at paternal love in yellow. I don't know if that slide's large enough for you to see it, but the areas in yellow were stimulated with maternal love, and the areas that are more reddish in romantic love. And this sort of sums it up, what we know, although this information keeps changing. This is from Helen Fisher at Rutgers University. What brain regions are generally associated with different types of love? We think the nucleus accumbens is those who are madly in love or recently dumped, that area of NRE, the ventral pallidum, also people madly in love after 20 years, long-term attachments. We mentioned the ventral tegmental area before, which is mostly associated with NRE, new love, reward up here in the brainstem, and the raphe nucleus, long-time lovers. It gives them a sense of calm. That is pretty much it. I'm not going to discuss this. This was an article by psychologist Carlos Yela Garcia, who discussed some of the common myths of love and relationships and how a lot of them lead towards violence in relationships. And finally, this slide, if I can do this now, I'm going to try to bring this up from NPR and a group called Skunk Bear that kind of sums it up. I'm going to open up a new screen. And allow for video. And maybe this will work. Are you seeing the browser?
No,
A
not right
blank
now.
screen so far.
Right. Are you seeing a browser that says NPR?
No.
I'm not.
Let's try this again. Okay.
Now
Now,
we are.
you see NPR?
Yep. Mhm.
Hopefully this will run because I like it. Can you hear it?
Yep.
When you looked in my direction, I thought my heart might explode. My heart was racing and I thought it might explode. Because my sympathetic nervous system caused norepinephrine to stimulate my sinoatrial node. When you looked in my direction, when you first looked into my eyes, when you looked into my eyes, my stress response diverted blood flow from my stomach and intestines, and it felt like butterflies. I knew that I wanted to marry ya, as my ventral tegmental area sent signals to my nucleus accumbens. And oh, oh, oh my lord, the anticipation of reward, that dopamine starts pumping. I know oxytocin is the potion of devotion. Give me that dose of dopamine. Hold the serotonin still going, growing stronger all the time. I love you, and I'm never gonna change my mind. When you first smiled at me, I did foolish things. Really stupid things. Because my judgment was impaired by a reduction in activity in my amygdala and the frontal cortex of my brain. When you first smiled at me, I began to fall. One smile and I began to fall. And so did my serotonin levels, producing anxiety. I couldn't eat or sleep at all. Then a year or two went by with serotonin on the rise, till I was feeling comfortable and calm. Now every single time we touch, I get that oxytocin rush. Our bond has never been so strong. I know oxytocin is the potion of devotion. Dial back that dopamine. Here comes serotonin, still going, growing stronger all the time. I love you, and I'm never gonna change my mind.
Lady, we've been together for a while now, and things are starting to mellow out. But that's okay, because we can get those sparks of dopamine back by experiencing new things together.
Oxytocin is the potion of devotion. A little bit of dopamine, a lot of serotonin, still going, growing stronger all the time. I love you, and I'm never gonna change my, never gonna change my, never gonna change my mind.
Happy Valentine's Day from Skunk Bear, NPR's science show. Subscribe to our channel and send this video to someone you love. Special thanks to Austin Zumbro for sparking the idea for this song.
Okay, and that's it.
Awesome. I guess we have a question. If you can share the link to that video.
To the video.
Yeah.
Yep. Let me open that up. I can. Oops, maybe I can't.
Well, in the meantime, I think that was an amazing talk. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, Doc, I got to say, I took notes on how much praise I want to give you. And it's not just because of my encephalitis. I mean, first of all, great job making the Zoom work from an IT perspective. I mean, okay, there are glitches, but hey, it worked. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
So Jeff and I spent a couple of sessions in the last couple of days going over that.
No. Just take the compliment.
No, I'm saying I learned a lot. I learned how to show a Zoom presentation and look at presenter views with notes, so it doesn't show on the screen. I learned to make a graph, put audio files in. I learned a lot by doing this in the week and a half that I've been working on it.
And that's the other thing is great talk. I mean, really wonderfully researched and summarized, which is hard to do. Thank you. So many interesting concepts introduced that clarified for me different aspects of affection and relationships and stuff that I sort of had feelings for, but there's nothing like having a term or a crystallized concept for. Thank you. That's great. And again,
Thank you.
in a week and a half, you're amazing. I got to say, and also what a great documentation. Again, it's not as if we need to understand that there's a neurological basis of behavior and how we think, but still great job summarizing and documenting that field. I mean, what little I know, nice, and learned a lot. Bravo, really. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah, I agree.
Question, Joel. When they
Yeah.
did attachment between filial attachment, did they test whether this was due to biology or growing up together? Did they take two a brother and sister, say, that were separated at birth, and determine if they had an attachment compared with two people who were unrelated who grew up together?
Are you referring to one of the studies?
Yeah, one of the studies where they were, well, when you're talking about filial attachment, I was wondering if this filial attachment is following biology or is it following sociology?
Well, I only remember there was one study that looked at lovers versus friends, and another
Okay.
one that looked at maternal love versus romantic love. I don't remember one on filial
Oh.
attachment.
You had mentioned, well, in the talk, it had mentioned that there are different types of attachment.
Yes.
One of them was filial attachment.
Right, correct. But I don't know of any studies. I didn't research
Okay.
any studies in that area. I was concentrating mainly on romantic love.
Yes.
Good question, Mike. Good
Thank you.
thinking.
Yeah, very good question.
The other question is when Harold, what's his name, did the experiment with the chimpanzees or with
With the
rhesus monkeys?
rhesus monkeys.
Monkeys,
Rhesus monkeys.
Rhesus monkeys. Did
Harold
he?
Harlow.
Oh, Harlow. Okay. Did he separate out the difference between the terry cloth body and the face, the more defined face?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I don't recall that he did.
I don't believe so either. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
his point was really to try to separate out sort of what would I call it? Vital needs, food, warmth, whatever, versus comfort needs,
Yeah.
softness, a familiar face.
Yeah,
I
if you-
remember that
if
from
you-
psychology.
Yeah, I think if you remember back from Psych 101, Maslow's hierarchy of
Maslow's
needs.
needs hierarchy.
Whoa, that was growing cobwebs back there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
And I think nourishment and food and drink is higher than affection, but he was showing in the rhesus monkeys that the need for attachment was
Yes.
actually an overriding choice above nourishment.
Yeah.
And
But again, but that was just for they weren't exactly a newborn, but that was for the young chimp.
right. These were interesting. These
I
were
seem to
interesting.
remember.
I don't know if he ever did anything similar with older ones. I don't think he
Yeah.
ever did.
I don't think so. I think he just used infant rhesus monkeys.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
very interesting from an infant perspective. The prediction I think anyone would have made is the reverse. And I know there's been
Yeah.
criticism of
Yes.
those studies, but I don't think anyone's ever shown anything convincingly different than, we are emotional. Sorry, primates are very emotional creatures. One thing I was going to say that was interesting was in your list of species that seem to show pair bonds. It's like right before you had shown that, I was thinking, you talk about love. I was thinking, now, wait a minute, sure, there's conspecific love, but we can certainly feel love for animals. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit that I've fallen in love with our dachshund, which is really weird. But wolves form pair bonds. And so I guess we have some kind of shared, he and I will stare into each other's souls. Please don't judge me. And my wife thinks it's so funny. Literally, we'll just stare at each other, and there's no animal, no cats, no horses. Well,
Right. Yeah, I don't know if they were talking about interspecies pair bonding.
No, but I think it's interesting.
Humans and dogs. They were
One
talking
clearly
about.
can. I mean, I think people fall in love with their dogs, and their dogs clearly
Yeah.
recognize them. I mean, you know, our dachshund goes bonkers for the two of us, but he knows strangers, and even if friends come over, yeah, he's okay, but he doesn't, it's not the same. You know, there's a pair bond with us and our dog. And my wife has had dogs her whole life, and that's always been her experience, and my experience of her is that there's a real one-on-one bond between dogs and humans possible.
Mm-hmm. And you could look at different species, and I'm surprised they don't mention chimpanzees, who I think do pair bond, but bonobos don't.
Right.
Chimpanzees are a paternalistic culture, and I think they form some pair bonds. Bonobos are maternal, and they just have whatever partner at the
Yes.
time is useful.
Yeah, amazing.
I also remember seeing that they thought that birds formed exclusive pair bonds. Some birds formed exclusive pair bonds
Yes.
until they started doing DNA testing of the chicks. And they found out only about 25% of the chicks had other.
Opportunistic.
Is that right? Well, how much of that was involuntary sex?
Yes, that's called opportunistic mating.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't mention birds in the slide. That was only mammals, and I know that I think cardinals and mourning doves form bonding pairs. Bluebirds do.
Don't eat. Yeah, bluebirds and eagles. I'm thinking
Eagles, yeah, eagles
I think
have
so.
Yeah.
families in the
I don't
area,
know.
but this was only talking about
Yeah,
mammals.
sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
It's even. Oh, go ahead, Gunn. I'm sorry.
thank you. Whilst we are here, I remember when I did that massage therapy thing, they also taught us that some king or the other wanted to find out what language babies would speak if left to their own devices. So he had them, fed but not nurtured. They were just fed, changed, blah, 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 and they all expired, I think, before the age of 6. I can't recall. I got to look at my Mosby's,
Uh-huh.
get the details. And it was about, the tactile touch, where we, as human beings, we have these receptors. I wish these scientists would have like normal names.
Yes.
Like that I could recall readily, but it's some blah blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, once those get stimulated, your hormones get released, all that wonderful stuff. You're in a crowd, these kinds of things, and so yeah, we're wonderful little creatures bumbling around on this planet doing stuff.
Yeah,
I think
Yeah,
that study was done with orphans in Russia.
yeah. There is a study of orphans, I think Russian orphans, because they are frequently left in their crib and not held and not nurtured.
Ooh. Yeah, and they did not do well, as I recall, even though they
Yeah,
were fed,
they-
and I just saw a paper. I did not read it, but a title of some abstract in some neuroscience journal looking at baby babble across cultures, and how there are similarities across all cultures in the timing and the tonalities, the types of consonants or vowels that are used. I mean, we are one species. It's very interesting that even without any enculturation, we're born humans.
That's correct, Eric, because I in my journey through life and learning different things. So you ask people because they look like Chinese, I'm like, okay. Those are what you call the outward appearance is cosmetic.
Yes.
But the underlying thing is human. And I said, okay, let's try this, right? Let's say you took a couple from China, you have them go on another part of the planet, and they, procreate, and that baby is raised in that, with the phonetics, would they be like, oh, like every fourth word? Because the people are like, I'm 1/4, something. And I'm like, so every fourth word you should be speaking. Or, oh, I didn't know that I was this, but you should have had an indication if it really was in your genes. But of course, I'm not famous, I'm not wealthy, I'm not Caucasian. So they're like, who the hell is this guy? I'm like, it's freaking common sense, people. Just learn some science.
Absolutely.
So,
What's really funny, there was a couple I know who were Asian, and they were from, I can remember it was Taiwan and mainland China, but they had a child who, then this was when I was living in Virginia, and their child had a gorgeous Virginia accent.
Yeah, children pick up languages very quickly.
Yes.
It's the phonetics. It was the same thing because, like I said, when whatever King Louis VI or whoever, anyway, I can't remember. But of course, didn't develop a language because they didn't hear any phonetics to emulate. You did mention that they do, the ooh gaga, kind of stuff, but nothing past that.
No.
So, and okay, so of course, as adult human beings, we're what I call the colonizer conditioning, that we are different ethnicities as opposed to just one race, one species of the planet, whichever part of the planet you're, birthed. And we are fighting each other because it's not only that, we have so many divisive subhuman labels.
Well,
Like
and
religion.
divisiveness is, fear mongering is a very powerful way to recruit people.
Right.
In fact, we were talking about Brazil. We were talking about Brazil earlier. It's my recollection, and forgive me if I have this wrong, but there is apparent. I mean, there's all kinds of discrimination in Brazil. I make up, economic or whatever. But apparently, racially, there's very little discrimination because there's lots of all kinds of shades of people in Brazil. Discrimination is not based on skin color; it's based on other things.
Well, the same thing was in, as I recall, in Rwanda, Burundi. During the wars there, where there was a split between the Hutus and Tutsis.
Right.
And they said, oh, the Hutus, one is great and the other is inferior. And we would think of it like Maasai and Pygmies, that there must be a big difference. But if you watch some of the films, nobody could really tell. I mean, they would say, oh, I know who that is. They're a Hutu or they're a Tutsi. But they looked exactly alike.
Right.
Well, this is the thing too. I was watching a documentary on the Amish. So of course, there's a general umbrella term of Amish, but then you go to like this portion of Amish on this part of the planet, and they have different interpretations of what their God says. So some may use a little bit more electricity than some others. And you're like, but we're all human beings. It's not Amish lungs. It's not Amish with this belief lungs. And I try to let people know, I will not mistreat you because I know now that you're a valid, viable, equally, even though, like, hey, you're not proud of where you're from. They think that you're being facetious, that you're being condescending. And I'm like, no, let's stop this insanity. I'm doing my part. And I can't beat peace into you. I can only let you know that I was born into this.
I'm sorry, I've never heard the phrase "beat peace into." I like it.
Thank you.
But I totally get it. It's like,
thank you. I can only share and invite them to think logically so that they can decipher the truth for themselves. It's not for me to force them to believe it. It's like just do the little logical thing is like, hey, because you say, okay, because I used to work with people, they call them Egyptians. But then if you were to go to the actual portion of Egypt, there's the Christian Egyptians, and then there's the Muslim Egyptians. Right. But if you were to go to either I just mentioned about the Amish, you go to the Christian portion, I guess, I don't know, or you go to the Muslim portion, there's all these little right. And I'm like, that's a human being. Just let them be alive, because I know that we've been conditioned that, and the thing about, these gods, why don't we just have the little arm wrestling to determine who is the real one instead of having human beings kill each other over who's the real one?
And Wendell,
arm wrestle for it wherever you are.
We're here today to talk about love.
And this opposite
of hate.
Yes. We could all love each other and that one true God if they arm wrestled for it.
Well, the good news is across cultures, children all smile the same.
Yes.
And eat Oreos the same.
Wait, what study showed that?
I think there was a study that looked at both.
Oh my God, that's fascinating.
Well,
Of
how
course
do
they
you
would.
eat Oreos differently? Sometimes you take the two halves apart and
Those terrible
That's how every
two-halvers.
child, that's
And
how
that's
every
just
child
wrong.
eats an Oreo.
No,
They
that's just
pull
wrong.
them apart
We need to
and
get rid of
they
the
eat
splitters.
out the stuffing and then
Center
they
part.
eat the cookies.
Yeah, no, we need to get rid of the splitters. An Oreo is supposed to be eaten all at once. Those
Yes.
people are wrong.
Those are adults once they get corrupted.
yeah.
And have you guys seen the variety on the shelf recently?
Oh my God, yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
that's
What?
mind-boggling.
Share.
I never thought there'd be triple chocolate, but I was incorrect. My
Oh,
thing
yeah.
is like,
Just-
dude, double chocolate?
Oh, there's like quadruple stuffing, and you
Yes.
you could just buy
Yeah.
the stuffing without the cookie. I would say like I used to be as a kid, is you take the stuffing out of all the cookies, and you take 2 cookies and you put all the stuffing in between them. Don't mess around.
Oh man.
Gluten-free mint Oreos.
Actually, I got to say, I recently discovered
Puffy Crunch
and
Oreos.
something that my lovely wife had been telling me for years, proof that, anyway, whatever, stubbornness, male, something, that I'm sensitive to gluten and to casein. And so I'm all about the gluten-free stuff and the dairy-free stuff, sadly, because, oh man, there's nothing better than a juicy, greasy cheeseburger. But gone is the day for me. Well, it's choice, right? I can either enjoy those things and ache, have my joints ache, and probably not live as long, or give them up.
What's the point of living longer?
Being with my lovely wife.
Oh, okay. I asked for extra gluten.
Let's just talk about the comedian I heard a while ago was talking about that vegetarians live 7 years longer. That's 7 miserable years.
Well, that's because they drive everyone else into the grave talking about being a vegetarian.
That's it.
It's only 7 years comparatively.
Yeah, guilty. Yeah, no, I'm only talking about myself. I'm lucky on you people who don't apparently have any sensitivities to those things. That's great.
Yeah. There's a joke about the reporter who goes and visits the guy who's over 100 years old and says, well, to what do you attribute your long life? And the guy says, I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't chase women. The reporter said, that's living?
Oh, you guys have heard of Benny Hill?
Yes.
I've heard of Benny Hill.
Yeah,
Brilliant. You'll see one of his sketches where
oh yeah.
he and I forgot the little fellow's name, and he's like, well, I'm something, and I got to this age by not doing this and that. He's like, wait a minute, you didn't get to look like that by enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I think I'm able to, well, it's a real first world problem if
Oh my
for
God.
me having to give up cheese and bread was a disaster. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful to figure this out so that I can enjoy life more in other ways. Like, for example, not having every joint in my body ache. And I know I'm getting way off topic here, but it is interesting how sidelight medicine, I'm sure you appreciate this, Doc, that it's amazing how much our diet is part of medicine, or should be. Or
well, I mean, there's a lot of new information about the microbiome of the body, of the microbiome of the brain and the gut and the skin. There was actually a whole issue of Science magazine recently devoted to new research. And I used to kind of poo-poo that, being a skeptic, and say, everyone would talk about the mind-body connection and all. I said, yeah, no, it doesn't exist. But now there is good evidence that the microbiome in your gut and skin and mouth can affect your brain. And it's kind of amazing stuff. It's very, very early data, but it is really eye-opening.
Well, here's another one, again, going off track a little bit, but many people, especially men who were once in rock bands, suffer from decreased hearing, with age, just in the high end, the sibilant sounds of high frequency stuff. And you might think, no big deal, except that can interfere with understanding speech. And as the parts of the cochlea that detect those sounds degenerate, the corresponding parts of the brain, not exactly the cortex, but deeper, degenerate, and makes it even harder and harder to understand speech. Anyway, the point is, it's a whole feedback loop that not treating something as simple as hearing loss can contribute to, yes, Alzheimer's. And there several studies have demonstrated this, and depression and all kinds of things. So anyway, yeah, it is amazing how a long time ago, one of my wisest friends, who was also an MD, we were talking about something, and he just looked at me and he said, yeah, biology, complicated. And it's true. We complicate it. And I think, to pull this full circle, your talk shows that a lot of stuff that we just feel like it's a choice or it's a rational decision, it's biology and it's complicated. And there's nothing like studying it and understanding it.
So about what age could you start using that as an excuse to avoid other human beings?
At any age. You
Any
can use
age,
that as an
thank you.
excuse.
I can't hear you guys.
And
I
also,
can't.
well done. But also at any age, you can treat it. And, it took me several years to listen to, again, my lovely wife saying, I think we should get some hearing aids. And yeah, I mean, the data are there, man. If you start, get a hearing check, and if it goes down, get the hearing aids. Don't be proud, man. It's good for you.
Right. No, you could be, you may not be Steve Austin, but you could still do the bionic thing. Plus we need
That's
electrolytes.
right. Like Michael, here's my hearing aid. I'm a bionic American. That's right.
Yes. Now the neural links, I'm not too sure about. Those people are talking about that thing. Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, I try to keep as much of it as possible. It might be 2 for me, brain cells, but I'm trying to maintain them.
Well, it's interesting too that one of the biggest threats apparently to maintaining cognitive function, you're challenging ourselves and doing things. One of the biggest potential mental threats is this.
Yeah.
Because this is my auxiliary memory. And I don't know how many times I've forgotten something, but it's in here in my to-do list or my whatever. And I'm just sort of catching myself relying on it too much. And evidence that in kids too, these things can slow their cognitive development. It's the curse. Everything is a one of these, right? Risk benefit.
Yeah.
Right, because I for my personal thing, I have reduced my social stuff, but I do like look up terms like dictionary.com, and you type in like, hey, let me find out this, you type in the search words, and that's what I use it for. Granted, I keep telling nice folk, there was a time when I had to wait till the library was open
Yeah.
to go pull a thing. Yeah. So that's what I use it for mainly. And it tells me, oh, you've used your phone 4 hours less than last month or last week or whatever. And I'm like, yes.
4 hours less. Mine says I've used it like 22 minutes less or 22 minutes more from week to week.
Oh, okay. So you fluctuate a little bit, but yeah.
Just fluctuate a little bit.
Well, but I got to take back what I just said. That everything is one of these.
Yeah.
Except for long-term love.
Yeah.
There seem to be no downsides to a steady, respectful, trusting relationship.
Yeah. I've been married for 47 years, so I agree with you.
Congratulations.
Bad joke alert. Bad joke alert. Is that like, killing 12 people? Like a life
It's like forever in dog years.
But we know that dogs can love too. So
yes, they can. Evidently cats can too, because every time I walk into the room, the cats hop up on come and walk over to me.
I'm not convinced about cats. I have a cat who I call Crazy Cat, who does seem to always come run over to me, but she always flips over on her side, and it's like I have to find the right place to scratch.
Oh,
I'm not sure that's love or her taking advantage of me and manipulating me. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, we call it cupboard love.
covered love.
I like
Cupboard.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Cupboard, like the food cupboard.
Food. Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I'll
the
love
food
you
cupboard.
as long as you feed me.
If you have, as long as the food keeps coming,
Right.
Or is it
or
And if
something
you-
else that they want.
And if you die, I will eat you.
right? Or so is that equivalent to kissing the pinky ring?
No, because that would be adulation, and they don't get anything out of adulation.
No,
not
but you need to know
psychological.
your place. That's basically what it is. Not, you know.
Well, yeah, but who's in charge of whom here? I
Cats.
think the cat's in charge of
Cats.
Cats.
With my wife, it's definitely the cats.
with us too. Well, and actually, even though we love the dachshund, the dachshund loves us. The dachshund's in charge, but you know, it's
Yeah.
just that's their breed. We have another dog who is the other way around, totally submissive. He's number two. You know, he you know wants pays attention to us. The dachshund tells us very clearly what he wants, but still stares into my eyes.
My wife has asked me this year when I'm doing the budgets to separate out the money she spends on bird seed for the birds outside, just to see how much it is.
Oh, those are my pets.
Yeah.
Yeah, recently I had to start buying fiery bird seed.
Yes.
To discourage the squirrels.
Yep. That we do the
And
same thing.
that stuff is expensive.
Yes, it
You
is.
can't just sprinkle like capsaicin on it or hot sauce or something.
Definitely a lot. I mean, you have to soak it into each of the granules.
Yeah, so this isn't just sprinkled with it, but it's soaked
Yeah.
into the seed so the birds can digest it without affecting them. But
Yeah.
squirrels,
aren't-
if they
birds
get
don't
into it,
react to
will get it
capsaicin.
in their face.
Oh, I just assumed that birds lack the taste receptors, and so it didn't
Yeah.
bother them. It's
That's
actually-
true. The birds don't react to capsaicin.
But
So
I mean, is it
they-
is it taste or is it guts?
Well,
Oh.
it would have to be the receptors for the
it
capsaicin.
was
not
probably in
just
the taste.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah, and the
could
squirrels
feel the-
do. So then they don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the squirrels hate it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you want to know, is make sure you wear gloves when you go anywhere near that stuff. Don't
Wait.
rub your eye.
Oh man, no.
Don't go to pee.
Yeah. I've cut up enough
Wear
peppers to know.
gloves. That stuff is strong.
Thank you for that heads up.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank him later.
Just happened to know that.
So I have a question for you, going back to your talk. What's
Yes.
the most surprising thing you learned preparing for your talk? And again, great. Sorry, before you answer that question, have you ever heard of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute? Okay, now you have.
I've heard of it, but I don't recall what it is.
There are a bunch of them. They're all over the place. There's one at NC State, and it's for people who like to teach, volunteer, share stuff. It's
Oh.
mostly gray hairs who want to stay mentally active and learn new stuff. That would be a perfect talk for Osher. So if you just Google Ollie, Olli.
Oh, yeah, Ollie. Now
There
that
you
you
go.
said that,
Yeah.
yeah, I know Ollie well through Duke.
Please volunteer that talk.
My good friend Ken Haslam taught a couple of courses at Ollie until he got too old to do it. And he actually invited us in to co-teach with him on some issues of polyamory.
But this talk you just gave is a natural. Give it. Please. I think that would be great. I think the community would love it. They're
Yeah,
always
it is.
looking for
It is
volunteers.
fun.
Yeah. And this is a great topic for that group. So now my question, what's the surprising thing? What's something surprising that you learned in preparing for this talk?
I mean, there's a lot of things besides learning how to use Zoom and PowerPoint. I think I really like the study on voles and the difference between males and females and oxytocin and vasopressin was really surprising to me because oxytocin is always talked about as the love potion. And, it affects everyone and makes them love. And here is a study that says, well, not men necessarily.
Well, I don't know if that's ever been reproduced in any or looked at in humans or not. It may have, I don't know. But I was surprised to see that as well. That was very cool.
And you guys mentioned about the DNA tests, and people still have this mindset about alpha male, the largest, will fight for the right to mate. But when they do the DNA test, they see it sometimes as some little scrawny little thing. Just
Well, that's the vasopressin.
While the males are fighting.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Well, you two guys are fighting over who gets the girl. I'm getting the
I'm gonna
girl.
get the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blame it on the antidiuretic hormone for toxic masculinity.
Yeah, really.
I'm curious about about the effect. I mean, it seems like culture has an awful lot to say about this. You're brought up, yes, you're going to fall in love. Yes, and listen to all the country music and all this stuff, and it's going to be the greatest thing in your life. And you get rejected, you're ready to commit suicide, and it's just so pervasive. We're so immersed in how love and romance and sex are supposed
Well,
to
that was the whole point of in literature. I mean, the idea of new love and spurned love and jealousy and violence from jealousy and mistrust and cheating. All of the great stories and many of the great stories involve that. So what if we didn't have that? And what if, again, in the polyamorous community, because people are having new relationships and multiple relationships in ethical relationships where your partner agrees and everyone knows what's going on and people know each other, we constantly talk about jealousy and compersion. And compersion is a new term made up for not necessarily the opposite of jealousy, but being able to deal with your own feelings about jealousy so that you come to understand that the jealousy is your own insecurity about yourself, and you can evolve to a point where you are happy that your partner is happy. So if your partner is, people will ask me, how could you stand that when your partner goes off with someone and spends time with them? It's compersion is, I'm happy because my partner is getting something from someone that I can't give them, and they're having a good time and they're happy. That's the giving of love. So if everyone learned to do that rather than be jealous and be alpha males and pound their chest with the vasopressin, this might be a whole different world.
Right. The ownership concept that you could own a human.
Well, yeah, that you are mine is right. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, I mean, love can be, I really want you to be happy, or it can really I really want you to pay, satisfy my needs. There's really two directions on that.
That's the whole issue of the concept of the patriarchy. And you're here to do for me, and you are my property.
All right. Well, it's funny. I will admit that raised as you can imagine in the 50s and 60s, a white male, there was a certain life track on which I was supposed to be. And so when I was, let's see, how old was I when that happened? In graduate school, here I was, I had a job and I had, whatever, but I had no wife, must have wife, must get married, and had some good friends, had a cousin they introduced me to, and she sort of fit the bill, and I guess I fit her bill, and it's like, oh, so we should get married, and so we got married, and it did not work. And thank God she had the guts to end it.
Yeah, maybe
I would have done this, oh no, we know. And I was able to then find my real wife, I like to call it, my current wife. And to me, it's very interesting to look at the two different experiences. I barely even remember how I met my ex-wife and what we felt for each other. I think it was all very programmatic, like you're saying, Wendell. It was like there's a track I was put on culturally versus quite by chance, in a way, I met my real wife doing an activity I enjoyed, that we both enjoyed. So it wasn't some setup. And anyway, just from personal experience, yeah, I get it. One can be programmed to fall on the track. It's like people who are told by their parents, you must take over the family business, or whatever, or you must become a great athlete. And that's not necessarily the case for everybody.
Well, looking at this from a biological perspective, you have to remember that all of this that we talked about is not based on forming a marriage.
Right.
Marriage is a social construct.
Right.
It is based on extending and growing the species, that we should meet someone and we could form some sort of bond to have children and raise the children safely to perpetuate the species. It doesn't mention marriage necessarily. And there are, again, species like bonobos where it's a matriarchy and the women decide who's going to sire their children and have several different mates.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be one way. On the other flip of that culturally is looking at cultures like the Indian culture, East Indian, where arranged marriages are still pretty common, and a lot of them work out very well. I don't know specifically how that's done, but a lot of people I know that had arranged marriages, they're very, very happy in a long-term relationship with that person.
Part of it is we all different. And for some people, the programmatic track works, depending on their needs, their personalities, what their priorities are. I think that's actually part of the lesson I get from you too, is that, well, it's kind of like not everybody is heterosexual. It's like we all different. We there's a range, and whatever button we put ourselves in, whatever box someone tries to put all of everybody in is a mistake.
Yeah, the new theory,
and Wendell says we are all human beings.
The new theory, and I forget who proposed it, is that it's not just box. It's not you're straight, you're gay, or even bi. It's everyone exists on a continuum somewhere between heterosexual and homosexual
and asexual,
and it's fluid and it moves back and forth. You may be only 10% attracted to the same sex, and 90%, or maybe 1%, but everyone exists on this continuum. But the same thing is true, I think, of multiamory and monogamy. They're both, monogamy is a social construct, and I'm not selling anything, but it's not right. Monogamy is right for some people and it's wonderful, and it's not right for others. And multiamory works for other people who have tried monogamy and it didn't work. So, and it works well for them once they figure it out. But I will warn people, if you think getting along with one person is difficult, adding a second is not any easier.
Which comes to the honesty part and knowing your lot in life. Let me give you a quick example. It might seem facetious, okay? So there are some of us, we are called beautiful people, okay? So we are not necessarily meant to be in monogamous relationships. Some of us, because somebody's going to try their best because they want to have a piece of you for that moment because they find you beautiful. They don't want to have a long-term relationship with you. They don't necessarily want to have any ill will against the other person. And I found that out with the being honest, that you don't have to lie. You just have to, if you find that person attractive sexually and you approach them, if they don't consent, you don't do the sour grapes thing. You just keep it moving. And they may be either testing you to see your mettle. They're different. I mean, we different individual human beings with different paradigms. For me, the only thing is equally wonderful.
Hmm.
And no judgment if you are polyamorous. Okay, so I'm really not picking on religion with the purity culture that invented the slut, the whore, the harlot, the strumpet, all these labels. My thing is, once it's my turn, I'm happy. I will try my best to elicit, if not one, at least multiple orgasms. To say, hey, you didn't waste my fucking time, so to speak, because
No pun
that's,
intended.
thank you. And
Good one, Eric.
but this is the thing, because you've seen people where, like you mentioned about the ownership and the thing, like because so I'm learning about the social graces. So I arrived late at a function that me and my little clique got invited to. So I stepped into the function and I saw this attractive young lady and I presented myself. So then I went and I found the fellas and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? The term is going for mine. But apparently somebody else that arrived earlier than I did, me arriving fashionably late, had already attempted with that particular young lady. So I didn't know this. So I'm like, oh, oops, because that's not what you do, so to speak. Is it bros before hoes?
Well, isn't she actually? Wait a minute. Isn't she supposed to be in charge
Right.
of what she decides to do, not you? I mean, you get
Yeah, that's
so true.
patriarchal there.
No, like I said, this is before I learned that it's the woman that's consenting. Don't call her any names, just keep it moving. And there's always somebody saying, like, what's wrong with you? Here I was all this while, pointing, like what do you call the airport type thing with a flashlight? But you're looking at this other plane, you're looking at this jet over there when there's this little helicopter going, you know what I mean? So you can still get some flight out of that helicopter, not comparing women to jet engines. But my point is, we just got to be honest. Let them know, because I've had that and they were like, thank you. But don't be because of certain situations, you don't go, hey, why you didn't call me? She didn't call you because it wasn't her turn. And
so it's basically being ethical, and we talk about ethical relationships, and we spend a lot of time in workshops working on consent and boundaries and how to accept no, how to ask for what you want. We do practices of you just ask for something and the person automatically in the exercise is no, and your response is thank you for taking care of yourself.
Yes.
And that's all you say. And it takes a lot of people a lot of work to learn how to do that.
Okay, do you guys remember the name of that movie with Robert Redford, Demi Moore, and Woody Harrelson?
Yes. I remember the concept, and I can't remember. He's a millionaire, and
yes,
have a certain amount of money to sleep with Demi Moore, and
right. Do you guys remember the name of that? Well, I guess I could Google it later.
You're asking a bunch of old people without memory.
Hey, wait a minute. We're old Americans. We're not just old people. Sorry. And I don't know that Ramiro and Faith qualify, and I'm not sure about Mike either. But
No, I didn't mean everybody, but there's a lot of us here.
Right.
I'm surprised to remember all three actors.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the name of the movie, right?
Yeah, but you don't remember the name. But yeah, I remember the movie. I never saw it, but I remember it.
But that was when I was married and I had a date with another person. Whatever her name is.
Yeah, but the bottom line is ethical.
Is the movie Indecent Proposal?
What?
Yeah, indecent proposal.
Is the movie Indecent Proposal?
Indecent Proposal.
Yes.
There's a winner. Ding, 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 ding.
Hey, I do Jeopardy all the time.
Yeah, you have to like stop thinking about it, and then it'll
yeah.
And Mike, tell the truth. Did you just Google it?
No, I didn't.
I would have.
That does help the memory a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, gentlemen, ladies, everybody,
Yep.
I'm going to have to go. Thank you so much for
Okay.
this. Great to see everybody.
Yeah, it's getting about 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it's approaching our time.
Jeff,
I'm gonna
thank
stop
you.
the
I know he's not here,
recording.
but thank you for suggesting this topic. Doc,